All right, so good evening, Natalia. Thanks very much for waiting. Sorry for the lateness. I was finishing some details with the previous class, and now my computer it's a little bit slow, all right? But how are you? Let me know if everything is okay, please, Natalia.
Yes, thank you. Hello.
Great, that's great to know. So let's begin. Before starting, I want to know, is my microphone okay? Do you hear me with echo? Can you hear me well?
No, I can hear you well.
Okay, good. So it means we can begin, and actually we are going to start with doing an exercise. Remember that today we're going to practice embedded questions. All right, this is something
Mhm.
that we know as we were able to see, but we have to practice again to be sure that everything is okay, that you remember how to formulate questions in every tense that we got, and that you can change those questions into some embedded questions. Okay,
Okay.
so
Mhm.
in the document that we got over here, we are going to start. Give me a second, please. Let's wait until it's loaded. Okay, but over here, we will write questions in all the tenses that we know so far, that we've learned so far, in future, and in all the tenses that we learned in that logic and with that sense. So here we're going to add one more row, and I'm going to give you the list of well, tenses that we have to use. All right. As always, sorry, it says my connection isn't stable. Please, if you don't get to hear what I'm saying or something is not clear, you're going to let me know. Okay, I'm going to try to continue, but the main instruction is going to begin now. All right, I'm
Mhm.
going to start giving the instruction now. If it's not clear, please you can ask me to repeat.
Okay.
Okay, so simple present
Mhm.
of B, let's say, that's the first one. Sorry. Okay, we're going to call them like that. Those are the first two. And remember, you have to write questions. And the questions are going to be first, yes, no questions. All right. And then WH questions.
Mhm.
Okay. So again, you remember the tenses. If we have that in present, we also have to do the same in past. All right. So exactly the same over here, but for past. Then you have the
Mhm.
present continuous and the past continuous. All right, same logic. One of them is going to be yes, no. All right, I'm just going to write that. And the other one is going to be, right, WH. Okay, all of them, again, they have to be questions. Then you have the simple future, right? This is going to be yes, no. And then you have future with be going to. Okay, and this is going to be, let me change that, WH. Okay, then we have the present perfect, and actually we're going to write that before. That's going to be over here. Okay, the present perfect, this is going to be, again, yes, no, and the same, but we have the present perfect continuous. Okay, and we only have one more. And this will be, of course, WH. And the last one, Natalia, with this, you asked me the questions that you got, models. All right, and this will be just one. All right, and this is up to you. It can be a yes, no, or WH. That's up to you, Natalie. So we need this number of sentences right now. But again, before starting, please let me know if you have any questions. You don't write embedded questions yet, okay? Don't write embedded questions. Only normal questions. For example, what is your name? right? What are you going to do next week? Those are normal questions, okay? Afterwards, we will change everything to embedded questions, okay? But right now, only normal questions so that later on we do the exercise. Let me know if you have any questions and if it's clear what you have to write when you see simple present, present continuous. Let me know, please, Natalia.
In the case of modal, I have to use auxiliary verbs, might, can, or like
correct. Any models that you know, may, might, can, should, must, any, but only one question. So okay. You choose which one.
Okay.
All right, good.
Okay, yes.
So let's do it, please. Let's do it. We're going to have 6 minutes more or less. In that time we check. If you finish before, please let me know. All right, I'm going to set the timer, and we check in that time to go to the real practice.
Okay.
Okay, so we are with the
think
6 minutes. Okay, great. Just in time. Okay, those.
But I'm not sure if that's okay.
All right,
That's correct.
don't worry. We will check. All right, and again, that's why we have to be sure that first your questions are okay, and then if your questions are okay, well, the embedded questions are going to be easy. All right, so just without checking, I'm going to give you some things that you have to change so that we can check just the details we need to, all right, revise, let's see. First, for example, here in the first one, remember if it says the simple present of be, it means that we only use the verb to be, right? And remember, if we use the verb to be in the simple present, we never use an auxiliary, right? We don't use do, does, did. We only use the verb to be. Why? Because anytime you have be in a sentence, you don't use other verbs, at least not main verbs. All right, so here, if you analyze, you don't have the verb to be, right? This is only simple present of other verbs. So what could it be? One yes/no question, Natalia, of simple present of be, only the verb to be.
Are you practice volleyball today?
But that's going to be, are you practice? It's going to be incorrect, right? That's not possible. You can say, are you practicing volleyball today? But that's present continuous, right? That's not simple present. Simple present of be only has the verb to be, no other verbs. You can use adjectives, you can use nouns, you can use anything, but you cannot use another verb, only the verb to be. Right? And actually, this is the most, or let's say the simplest sentence in English, because this is the first thing that you learn in a language. How do you introduce yourself? Right? You say, I am Natalia. Right? How do you say your age? I am, I don't know, I'm going to say, okay, I'm Luis. I'm 32 years old. Right? I am from this place. I am like this. I'm short, I'm tall, I'm very happy right now. I'm in the park, right? And so on and so forth, right? So the verb, the simple present of be is only the verb to be, and this is the simplest form of any sentence. All right, so what question do you have in mind? It has to be a very simple question. It doesn't have to be complex because we don't have complex ideas with the verb to be.
Are you Luis?
Yes, you can verify that. Exactly. Okay, this is the most common way. I'm going to write it for you, right? Are you Luis? That's going to be a yes/no question in the simple present of be. Okay, so anytime you see or you need to give an idea only with the verb to be, you can write something like this. Okay, are you in the park? Are you right sick? Are you happy? Is she in this place? And so on and so forth. Okay, so basic ideas about names, age, general description, physical description, also your status, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the first one. Then let's check if we need something else. Also,
I am
here
hear you with echo.
with echo again. I don't know why it happens. Let me change that. I don't know why it's like that. Okay, it should be good now. Is it good now?
Yes.
All right, great. I don't know why. It's weird that it's happening that thing with the echo. But anyways, also here, right? We have the present continuous and the past continuous. Okay, present continuous, past continuous. But here, simple past of be, this is not, right? The simple past of be, this is past continuous. All right, so how can you change this to the simple past of be? We cannot use other verbs, only the verb to be.
where they are,
One more time, please. Were they?
where they, no, where,
Because up to that part, right, we have that, that's correct. Now remember, after this, you use objects, you use names, you use ages, you use adjectives, right, because you can describe. So anything that you have in mind, but except an action. Okay, you're not going to say an action. You're going to say just a description, a name, age, a status, and so on.
mhm. Were they in the house?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so you can ask again anything related to the previous one. If you're asking, were they sleeping? You can ask, right? Were they tired? Okay, were they tired
Mhm.
after I don't know, right? After working a
Mhm.
lot, and working a lot
Mhm.
there is not going to be the verb; it's going to be just gerund. Okay, but the main idea will be, were they tired, right? Or were they single? Were they married? Were they in the house, in the park? Were they John and Mary? Okay, so any question related to names, to adjectives, to age, and to, well, anything that you have in mind that is not an action is going to be okay in the simple tenses of be. Okay, it can be simple present as here, or it can be simple past as over here. Okay, so we're
Mhm.
going to mark these two ideas.
Mhm.
All right, and I believe then after this, we will check the other ones. Let's read this now, Natalia. I wanted to verify those two. Now let's read
Mhm.
all your questions, and I'm going to see if we have any details.
Mhm. A simple present of other verbs. What do you cook for dinner? Um, simple past of other verbs. Where were you sleeping last night? Present continuous. Are you going to a concert tonight? Past continuous. Who are you going to the concert with? Present perfect. Have you visited your parents this month? Present perfect. Present perfect continuous. What What have you prepared for lunch? Simple future. Will you travel to Canada again? And future, will you going to? Where will you eat in your diet? Modals. Could you lend me your pencil?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now let's check the other details. All right.
Mhm.
Now here, if we analyze the simple tenses, okay, anytime you read simple, and again, this is just if you are going to practice or if you're going to know something. But simple tenses are always going to have, remember, the auxiliaries do, does, or did, right? Here in number two, it is great because you have do, right? Why? Because the subject is you, right? What do you cook for dinner? It's like a question for routine, right? Not for now. You're not asking for now, right? What do you cook for dinner now? No, that's incorrect. Here you want to know, what do you cook for dinner usually, every
Mhm.
time, every day, right? If your question is about routine and you ask like this, it's correct, okay? It's not the same as in Spanish. In Spanish, we say, right, that like this, what do you cook now? But
Mhm.
that's something that it's not correct in English, all right? So that's something that's
Mhm.
a cultural difference. All right. And again, I'm
Mhm.
explaining this because it's very common to say things in simple present, but we really need to use the present continuous, for example. Okay.
Mhm.
And here, for example, you're doing this. You're using actually the opposite. You're using what tense? How do we know that something is simple or continuous? Something is simple if we only have the verb in the base verb, okay, or in a simple conjugation, right? Here you have are, no other verbs. Here you have cook, and you have the auxiliary, right? Here you have be, you don't have other verbs. But this is not simple. Why? Because you have other verbs and you are
Mhm.
conjugating the verb with ing, right? So this is continuous. All right, this is continuous. So this is not
Mhm.
simple past. How can you change this sentence to simple past?
Where were you? last night.
But that's going to be that's okay. That's simple past, but that's simple past of be, right? Simple past with other verbs is any other verb, but you don't
Other
use the
verbs.
verb to be. So
Mm,
what could it be? It can be the same. It can be the same example, but you have to change two things to make it correct.
mm.
And to know
Where did
this,
you where did
uh-huh,
you sleep?
correct, perfect, exactly. So if it's not going to be something that is happening or was happening, we don't use the verb to be. All right, we only use the verb to be for continuous tenses. But that's perfect. If you don't have the verb to be, you need an auxiliary, right? And after the auxiliary, you always use the main verb in the base verb, right? Right. And again, it's important knowing this because we are going to replace sometimes these auxiliaries, and it's important to remember very well when we
Mhm.
use this one or when we use this. But remember, what is the difference, Natalia? When do you say where were you sleeping last night? And when do you say where did you sleep last night? When is it a good idea to use the past continuous and when is it a good idea to use the simple past? What do you say? What's the rule? Or what's the logic that you can follow?
Mm, if you say where are you sleeping or where were you sleeping, it's like the action is continue happening. And when you say where did you sleep, it's because the action is finished, has finished. But
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
that the explain the situation is similar. I don't know what is
Yes,
the
because
difference.
also in past, because actually what you're saying is good, but only it applies for the for the present continuous. But both the past continuous and the simple past both are finished. Okay, if
Mm-hmm.
you ask where were you sleeping last night, it's finished. Okay, it has no
Mm-hmm.
contact with the present. And if you say where did you sleep last night, also is finished, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in this case both are finished, so that's not going to be the difference. It is the difference, yes, with the present continuous, right? Where are you sleeping now? Of course that's happening now,
Mm-hmm.
right? But only in past. What would it be then the difference between where were you sleeping last night and where did you sleep last night? And this is similar to Spanish. All right. When do you ask
Mm-hmm.
something in the continuous form in the past? If you analyze, actually, it's not natural to ask something in the past continuous. Okay. If you remember what's the main usage of the past continuous, that's something we learned. It is context, right? If you're not using the past continuous as context for something else, don't use it because it's going to sound weird, unnecessary. All right. You can
Mm-hmm.
simply ask, where did you sleep last night? Period. But if you're going to ask, where were you sleeping last night? You need context, or I mean, that's the context. So you need other actions. So you can say, right, you are, I don't know, right? You know someone and you call that person and you say, hey, where were you sleeping last night when I called you? Right? So I want to know where, right, was that action taking place when I did something over there. Okay, so again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
mentioning that because usually we are not going to use the past continuous unless we have that as context and we have other events in the simple past
Mm-hmm.
in between or interrupting the action. Okay, if we don't have that, again,
Mm-hmm.
it's weird, right? It's like you're asking, um, what were you eating yesterday? Okay, or you can simply ask, what did you eat yesterday? All
Mm-hmm.
right, and again, you're going to only ask what were you eating if you are going to add something else. What were you eating yesterday when you had that problem? Okay, so again, you always have an idea over there. So that's the main idea. I don't know if you have questions about that, Natalia. Let me know, please.
No. I can understand now, but always I forget that because if you say me write a sentence or write a question in simple past or write a sentence question in past continuous, I don't remember the name of that tense. So this is the reason because I always forget and I write incorrect questions.
All right, no worries. Yes, because you're writing the questions correctly, right? And that's great. That's what I'm noticing. It's not that you're writing the questions incorrectly. It's just the name of the tense, right? That is not going with the example. So it's good. All right, it's good. And again, that's not going to be very important, but just in case I'm clarifying those things. But if that's the only problem, then we are very good. All right. Then it will be the same in number 6. All right. If I tell you that number 5 and number 6, what do you think that the little mistake that you have is? Remember, number 5, it says present continuous. And number 6, it says past continuous. So what do you think is the little mistake in between number 5 and number 6? And actually, you only have one little mistake in number 6.
The order of the words?
It seems to be okay. Are you going to a concert? Yes. Also here, going to the concert with, yeah, no, it's okay. But remember, actually, the main problem is this is present and this is past. Okay, so what do you have to change in number 6? Because number 6 is also present. How do you change that to past?
Who were you going to the concert with?
Exactly. Only the verb to be, right? If you have a sentence with the verb to be, only the be changes because this is present or this is past. Okay, so yes, who were you going to the concert with? And again, this is going to be context for something else, right? Who were you going to the concert with when you saw that person or while something else was happening? Okay, but again, that's something extra. Here, just this one, right? If you see past, it has to be the verb to be conjugated in past. All right, now this is good.
Sense?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, again, it's going to make sense if you have a context. Like this is correct, grammatically speaking is correct. And yes, again, it's going to be more natural. Now it's okay, but it's something that you are not going to ask just like this. If you only want to ask this question, you need the simple past, right? Who did you go to the concert with? Right? If that's the only question. But if you ask this question, it is advisable, okay, it's recommendable, use another idea, right? As I told you, who were you going to the concert with when it started to rain, or when you saw that person, or something else to justify the usage of the past continuous.
And the next
part,
but again,
it's not
is in past. For
it
example,
has to be in past.
Who were you going to the concert with when I called you?
Yes, exactly. It has to be in past because if it's in present, it's going to be incorrect. Why? Because the past continuous is also a finished action. Okay, there's no contact with the present. So it's better to use the simple past in the second part. Or also you can use another past continuous, right? You can say, who were you going to the concert with while I was calling you? So you can also use those two, okay? Because the two actions were happening at the same time. All right, good. So that's number 6. Here, number 7 is great. Have you visited your parents this month? Perfect. Also, this is correct, but it's not continuous, right? And how do we know? If you don't see the verb to be and you don't see a verb with ing, then it's not continuous, right? Anytime you read continuous, you have to use to be verb with ing. To be, verb with ing, right? Here, if it's present continuous, only simple present continuous or present continuous, here we have the verb to be in present and we have the verb with ing, right? If we have the past continuous, we have the verb to be in the simple past and the main verb with ing, okay? So here, if you have the present perfect continuous, you need the verb to be in the past participle with the auxiliary that you use, and you need the main verb with ing. So you can change this same sentence to the present perfect continuous. How do you think that you can change it? Remember, you have to use the verb to be conjugated in the tense that you are in. Okay, the verb to be has to be in the present perfect. And then you use your main verb after the verb to be conjugated with ing. So what do you say? How can you change number 8 to make it present perfect continuous?
And what are you preparing for lunch?
Close, but are is present, right? That's simple present. We don't need here the simple present. We need the past, the present perfect. So are is the verb to be in simple present. Where is the verb to be in simple past. What is first? What is the past participle of the verb to be? What do you say?
Going.
It's the third column. Hey, tell me.
Going.
No, oh, the verb to be, right? The verb to be, how do you conjugate the verb to be in past? Tell me the two conjugations of the verb to be in past, right? You have go,
Was.
went. Okay, go ahead.
I was going.
Yes, first is be, right? Be is the base verb. The simple past is was, were.
Were.
And what's the third column? What's the other conjugation in past? Right? I'm going to give you one example. I'm going to say see, right? See, base verb, saw, simple past, seen, past participle, right? Take, base verb, took, simple past, taken, the past participle. So what is the three? What's the conjugation of the verb to be?
Been.
Been, correct. So here you have to use the past participle. And remember, before the past participle, you need what? The auxiliary. You always use the auxiliary have over here. All right? So let's try to organize the ideas. Remember, this is going to be the logic. I'm going to give you the logic in affirmative, all right? And then you're going to make it question. So if in affirmative is this, it's the subject plus have or has, right? It depends on the subject, plus the past participle of the verb to be, plus the main verb with ing, plus the complement. Okay, this is what you have in affirmative ideas. This is the main structure. So first, let's try to give one example in the affirmative form, please, Natalia. Using this formula, what example can you give me in the present perfect continuous? Like this, one affirmative sentence, not a question.
I have been driving for hours.
Very good. It's perfect. It's a great sentence. Also, the expression that you're using is perfect. I have been driving for hours. Very good. If this is right affirmative, how do you change this to negative? What is the negative form of this? Remember that all the tenses are very simple. You only need to add one word for negative. So how do you say this in negative?
Haven't. I haven't.
Exactly. There you go. And what is the question for this? How do you ask a question?
A yes, no question?
Yes, first a yes, no question.
Have you been driving for hours?
Perfect. Have you been driving for hours? Great. And now WH question, the last one. And this is very easy because you only need to add one thing or make little changes or omit some information.
What have you been
Good.
for hours?
But if you ask what, right, what have you been, that's going to be a different question, right? You can keep it like that. You can say, what have you been driving for hours? Or if you want to omit this, remember, you cannot omit the verb because this is what makes this continuous. So you can say doing, right? You have to replace this with an action, okay? You cannot change because that's going to be a different tense. So yes, what have you been doing for hours? I have been driving for hours, okay? So this is the present perfect continuous. So how do we change number 8 to the present perfect continuous, right? So you can make just 2 little changes and that's going to be great. What do you say?
What have you been preparing for lunch?
Perfect. Exactly. Okay, there you go. Now, again, this is important so that you analyze something, Natalia, okay? And not only for memorizing, because again, yes, actually, perhaps it's not good that I'm making you memorize these elements, but actually, I also think that it's a good idea that you pay attention to these names. Why? Because I know that in the future, you are also going to keep improving your English skills, all right, alone. Sometimes you have to do it alone, or perhaps you're going to be in other institutes, in other places. And again, you can learn many things just, let's say, in a very empirical way, okay, without knowing theory, any theory, right? And that's good. That's the best way to learn a language. But what happens when you want to improve more and more your skills? You have to go to the theory. All right. So again, this is useful when in the future or whenever you need, all right, or you have the necessity or of making your English even more advanced. It's going to be a good idea to know these names. Okay. Right now, again, remember, this is not going to be any test. I don't evaluate these names. You don't have to know these for me, but you have to try to memorize some of these for you so that if you know that in your sentence something is weird, you can check the theory and you can be sure that it is correct. Okay, that's the only purpose of doing this. But remember, what are you learning here is that if you need to write a continuous tense in any tense, you always need what? The verb to be and one verb with ing. Any tense. Okay, because absolutely any tense can happen, even in future, right? You have the future continuous. We didn't learn that yet, but how would it be the future continuous? If this is future simple or simple future, I will travel tomorrow. That simple future. How do you think that we can make that future continuous? Or perhaps you know, how do we change this sentence to future continuous? Remember the rule, you have to use the auxiliary that you have. So will has to be there. You don't change will. But what's the main rule? We need the verb to be with that auxiliary, and then we need the main verb with ing. And then that's it.
I have will traveling tomorrow.
But remember, have is only the present perfect, right? We don't use have. Only have because we were in the present perfect. But here, we're with will. Now, will is the have of this sentence. This is have. Okay, will. After will, we need the verb to be. But what's the rule? After will, how do we conjugate the verb, Natalia? After will, we use past, we use the base form, we use infinitive, we use gerund. What do we use after modals, after the verb? And here is the answer. What is the form of this verb?
Um, for future continuous.
Like this, just like this. What is the form of travel? Is it base verb? Is it infinitive? Is it gerund? Is it simple past? Is it past continuous? What is the form of this verb?
Is the base form.
The base form, exactly. So if the rule says that after will we use the base form, now remember that for the future continuous or for any continuous tenses, we use the verb to be. So how is the verb to be going to be after will? Because you need this logic over here. If you want to use future continuous, remember, this applies to anything. Subject plus, in this case, it's future will plus the verb to be plus, right, the main verb, the same. Right, sorry. Main verb with ing. All right, then you have plus the complement. If this is the formula, how do you make this continuous?
I will be traveling.
Yes, that's it. Okay, and you don't need to do anything else. And again, all right, and the only thing I'm showing you here, because this is not the main topic, but I'm showing you the following, Natalia, that again, anytime you want to say anything that is happening in the present, that was happening in the past, that has been happening in the present and continues into the, in the past and continues into the present, that had been happening in the past before another event in the past, that will be happening in the future, that is going to be happening in the future, that can be happening, that could be happening, that would be happening, that should be happening. If you analyze all of them, absolutely all of them, always, no exceptions, verb to be and the main verb with ing. But you only have to be careful with the conjugation. If you're using the verb to be after an auxiliary like have, you have to use the past participle. All right? If you are using only the simple past of the verb to be, you have to use were. If you're using the present of the verb to be, you have to say is, are, or am, right? It depends on the subject. So you only need to be careful with that, how you conjugate the verb to be. But if you understand how to conjugate the verb to be, you know that it's always going to be like that. All right? Anytime you have continuous tenses, use the verb to be, and your idea is going to be correct. Okay, but again, this is something extra. It's only something that I wanted to take into account. You don't have to understand entirely this now because it's not part of the sentence, but I want to know if you have a question or a comment about this, please, Natalia. Let me know so that we finish the last part and then we make the changes because it's going to be simple. But let me know.
Could you repeat the last part about the use the present continuous, the conjugate of the verb to be?
Yes, I mean you have to know that the verb to be is conjugated in different ways, right? If I ask you the present continuous, right? How is the verb to be conjugated? It's conjugated in the simple present, right? And what's the conjugation of the verb to be in simple present? Am, is, are. Okay, so you have to change the verb to be like that. If I ask you the past continuous, the past continuous tells you that you have to use the simple past of the verb to be. So what are the two conjugations of the verb to be in simple past? Was and were, right? Then if I ask you the present perfect, what's the conjugation of the verb after the auxiliary? The past participle, right? So you have to use be in the past participle. Then the rest of all of the rest is very easy. Why? Because they are modals. After all modals, what's the rule? Always 100% of the time, no exceptions, base form. Okay, so the verb to be has to be the base form after all auxiliaries. I will be traveling. I can be traveling. I could be traveling. I would be traveling. I should be traveling, and so on. All right. So what I was saying in the last part, Natalia, is that the continuous form is always going to have the verb to be, but you only have to be careful on how you conjugate the verb to be according to the tense that you're using. Okay, that's the only thing you have to be careful. That was it. I don't know if you have any other questions about that.
The conjugation of the verb to be in present continuous is being.
But if you have to use the verb to be as part of your logic, this is the conjugation, right? Is are or is or am, right? Here you can use, but here what I'm saying is that the verb to be has to be in simple present in the present continuous. Okay, so you have three forms, right, of conjugation in simple present: am, is, are. That's what you have to use in the present perfect, right? Are you going to a concert tonight? Is she going to a concert tonight? Am I going to a concert tonight? So am, is, are. That's the conjugation in present continuous, right? Here the same. This is past continuous. What's the conjugation of the verb to be in the past continuous simple past, right? It can be were you eating before, or was she eating before. So where and was, those are the two conjugations for the past continuous. And as I was saying, the present perfect continuous, this is the logic. You always use the conjugation in that tense. Here you use the verb to be, but it has to be in the past participle because that's what the rule says. You use the auxiliary, the verb to be in the past participle, and then any other verb with ing. Okay, you have to be careful only with those conjugations. If you know those three or those four, the rest of them is always the base verb. It's not going to change. And perhaps I can give you just one more, and then it's going to be like something extra you can do, Natalia. But no, actually, let's try to give in each tense, all right, to see if that's clear. Give me one idea, any sentence in the present continuous, Natalia. What example can you give me? Just speaking.
The present continuous. I am preparing, or I am cooking rice for lunch.
Perfect. Now let's use the same example for all the tenses. Okay, so I'm preparing, right? What was the thing that you were preparing for
rice.
lunch? Rice. Okay, so I'm preparing, or I'm cooking, right? Or I'm making rice for dinner. Now, what's the past participle? Sorry, the past continuous. The same sentence.
I was cooking rice for lunch.
Perfect. I was cooking rice for lunch. What is the present perfect continuous? And that one, remember, it has the auxiliary have or has.
I have been cooking rice for lunch.
Exactly. The rest is the same. You only change that part. The verb to be is the only thing that changes, Natalia. The rest of it is always the same. So I am cooking rice for dinner. I was cooking rice for dinner. I have been cooking rice for dinner. And in future, how do you say that in future? Future continuous.
I will have.
No, have, remember, have is not future, right? Have
Ah,
is present continuous, only present continuous.
mhm. I will been cooking
But remember
rice.
the rule, after will, what's the rule? 100% of the time, no exceptions. After will, always the base form.
Okay. I will cook rice for
No,
lunch.
but it's just that you say been, right? I think that you say been,
Uh,
but been is not the base form, right? What's the base form? Be, only be.
mhm. I will
Okay.
be
And then the
preparing
rest. Good.
the rice, preparing rice for lunch.
Exactly. I will be cooking or preparing rice for lunch or for dinner. And then if I ask you with a model, the same idea with the model could. Okay, could. And remember, it's the same. It's exactly the same as with will.
Mhm. I could be
Mhm.
cooking rice for lunch.
Exactly. And with all models, it's going to be the same, always based from, okay? So we don't say been or being after a model because that's always incorrect. We only use the base form after all models, after will, can, could, should, must, may, might, and so on and so forth, okay? Only the base form. And if the verb to be is in the base form, then you need the main verb with ing. All right, so again, if you
And the
analyze it,
verb
yeah,
and the verb is in past participle. Only use the verb in past participle when you are talking about the present continuous tense.
the present perfect.
The
The
present
present
perfect.
perfect continuous. Yes.
Mhm.
Also, you have the past perfect. I'm not sure if we cover with you the past perfect yet, Natalia, but also the past perfect. And you can
Mhm.
say in perfect tenses because you have the present perfect, you have the past perfect, you have perfect models. All right. But that's something different. But if you have a perfect tense, the perfect tenses always use the past participle. So
Mhm.
instead of the main verb in the past participle, for a continuous example, you have to use the what? The past participle of the verb to be. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's only when you have perfect tenses. I have been traveling. I had been studying when you called me. All right, that's the past of the past. Or I could have been doing that instead of that. Okay, so
Mhm.
those are more complex examples, but I'm showing that the perfect tenses are always going to have the auxiliary have, has, or had. Okay, so
Mhm.
if you see those auxiliaries, you have to use the past participle in the next verb. It can be
Mhm.
other verb, not the verb to be, or it can be the verb to be. It's up to you. If it's the verb to be with another verb with ing, then it's a perfect tense in a continuous form. If it's only another verb in the past participle, then it's the simple form of that verb. Okay, simple, if you analyze, you have simple in many cases, simple present, you have the simple past. Also, this correctly, if you want to call this correctly, it's going to be here the present perfect simple. Okay, so simple is always going to be the opposite of continuous. All right, simple only conjugates the verb, continuous conjugates the verb to be plus another verb. All
Mhm.
right, the same over here, right? If it's simple, it's only the main verb, sleep. But if you have past continuous, you have the verb to be plus another verb with ing. All right, and like that, you have always the simple version of that tense and you have the continuous version of that tense. Simple future, the simple future or the future continuous. Simple past,
Mhm.
past continuous. Simple present, present continuous, right? Those simple models and you have perfect models. And like that, in all the tenses, you have that variation. Okay, so yes, you have to use the verb to be always in the continuous tenses. And if it's a perfect tense, it's always going to be the past participle after have, has, or had. Okay, that's more or less the logic that we need to have. Now, because of the time, we're going to be finishing here. We are missing one more part of this practice that we will finish on Friday. Okay, but it was important to see these details. To me, it was really important to see that this is clear. But I don't know if you have any last question before finishing, as I'm sending the poll for you, Natalia. Let me know, please.
No, I have to study and remember the times of the verbs for practice.
All right. Yeah, I mean, again, you did it great. It's just that you said, right, the names, but that doesn't have to be the priority, right? As long as you know the structure, that's good. So if you know the structure, that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. All right. And well, that's it. And again, today today is actually the last day for this, but we're going to use a part of the next class to finish this one. All right, to finish this last practice. But I have to present the last survey. So I'm sending now the next poll, just 2 questions. Let's also answer that, please. And that's it. Try to review this. Try to review embedded questions, because our practice on Friday is only going to be 10 minutes. All right, because all these questions that now are going to be correct are going to be changed to embedded questions. And embedded questions is only changing the order. And that's it. With that, we finish and we start the next course. All right?
Okay.
Good. So that's it then for now, Natalia. Have a good night and I'll see you on Friday.
Okay, thank you. See you.
Bye-bye. See you.